Steve, it's a bumper year for acorns, isn't it? What's going on?
Well, we had a lovely spring. It's all down to the spring, really. We had this very strong spring in March, April, so lots of air pollination, then insect pollination. So we've not just got lots of acorns, we've got lots of most other things. You know, lots of hawthorn, blackthorn, crabapple is having a great year. Some things that did well last year, rowan did well last year, that's not been so good, but most things have done well this year.
And you collect the acorns. I peeped in the back of your van earlier, and there were sacks and sacks of those. What's going on?
Well, we collect them, we've collected them for 25 years or so, large amounts of tree seed, not just acorns, from very light stuff like birch seed to hornbeam, field maple, crabapple, hawthorn, blackthorn, and we collect it to be replanted, grown into whips, and that happens throughout the country. We work there's a group of us that work together as a co-op, and we have, but it's mostly family and friends that work with me here. There's a phrase, from seed to soar, so we work from seed to soar, which is quite I feel like it's a very nice cycle. Well, we've planted a lot of trees, all of us as well, and that's into millions, a lot in Wales, a lot in this part of the country. We've been able to plant out stuff that we've collected a year or two prior. We've been able to find the nursery that held the seed and then buy it back off them. But this year, I'm actually going to be collecting some seed from a hedgerow that I planted about 15 years ago. So that is a new stage of where I'm now collecting from stuff that I collected to plant. I'm now collecting off of the collection, which is quite that's quite a pleasure, really.
It's satisfying, isn't it?
Yeah. So, and I'm seeing that alive with birds all year round, and you know, buzzes with insects in the spring. So it's really good.
Steve, we've been looking through our camera traps and we've got 1 or 2 badgers. Not as many grey squirrels as I thought we were going to see, but lots of deer. We've got a few roe, plenty of fallow and some muntjac as well. Why the superabundance of deer here, do you think?
Well, I think it is a Sussex, Surrey, Kent. There's a lot of woodland in all of this area, a lot of broadleaf woodland. There's plenty of places for them to hole up. We're very close to the Ashdown Forest, which is quite vast. You've got situations where you've got lots of different owners, often with very small holdings that they don't recognise that deer may have an impact, so they don't manage the deer populations, whereas larger situations sometimes do manage the deer populations, so they've been able to reduce them. But in this situation, they just keep, it doesn't matter, they just keep coming and coming and coming. And I think that my conversations with older woods people from Sussex, I'm fortunate to work with some people that are older than me, and they can remember, you know, Sussex being a very big timber and woodland producing county. We have all of this chestnut woodland here, which would be used for fencing, you know, lots of coppice, lots of firewood. Great oak, you know, you call the oak in Sussex, used to be called the Sussex weed. It grows so easily. So there's a lot of timber production, but the management and coppice structures were very good. They created a great habitat. So it was quite sympathetic what happened to one another. They worked with each other very well. But I think the '87 storm completely changed the fabric of the landscape here. So lots of timber got blown over. People's an industry that was already tiring because of metals, plastic. We made everything from wood. You know, we're still making lots of things from wood that we can then, and this changed. So suddenly there's less people in the woodlands become derelict, the coppices become derelict, so we create habitat for deer to be in. At that point, I think that we saw then that the estates needed to find ways to fund the woodland work and also to maintain their woodlands, and I think that's when more shooting started to occur. You know, with the growth in shooting, whereas previously there's always been shooting, but smaller groups of people, you get big shoots, and then obviously there was a lot of grain being deposited in the woods throughout the year, so the deer then had, if it was a poor year for them, there was always food stocks. So the deer and the squirrel numbers, I think, were fed to some extent, and we've ended up in a situation where, alongside people not wanting to manage the deer that they've got, them being fed as well. So we've got a lot of them. It's a bit of a sad story really, because it really affects both the deer and the squirrel, but affect all other nature and lots of the birds, you know, they're both affecting bird habitats. The squirrel numbers this year have died back because of the poor seed year last year. It was so poor the year that I noticed in earlier than usual the squirrel were starting to eat the food stocks, and then they were in the crowns of the oaks eating the acorns before they hit the ground last year. So they knew that it was a poor year, and then during the winter months I was finding dead squirrels in the woods. So they, you know, they basically starved last year. That's the story of squirrels.
This year they're not going to be starving.
They're really not, but there's not so many.
No.
So I think that there's going to be a lot of trees get away this year.
Yeah.
You know?
Which is great. Great news for us here.
Yeah.